CNBC's partner Just Capital out with new rankings when it comes to the top companies for workers. Let's go over to Brandon Gomez. He has some details for us. Brandon.
Yeah, David. Hey, good morning. An interesting one on the labor front. Just Capital looked at how Russell 1000 companies perform on key issues American workers say matter to them most. Issues like paying a fair and living wage and fully paid parental leave benefits. Well, let's start with the good. Here are Just Capital's top 10 companies for workers. Banks and semiconductor companies being the most prevalent. Bank of America and Citi and NVIDIA, the top three names on the list. JP Morgan, AMD, Micron rounding out the names there. Now, these companies all offer a range of benefits, longer paid parental leave for both primary and secondary caregivers. Many disclose an hourly minimum wage with pay on average higher than their peers. Of note, too, many of these companies disclose workforce demographic data by gender and race, something less than half of Russell 1000 companies do. They also conduct internal audits to close the gender and racial pay gap. Now, I say of note because we've seen recently a handful of companies pulling back on these types of DEI practices. Ford, Lowe's, Brown-Forman, the latest to announce internal changes to their DEI disclosures and policies, the very policies that lead Just Capital's list of top employers. So, David, you have to wonder, will companies continue to prioritize these key issues that matter to American workers, or will more begin to reassess an important consideration as we consider to discuss the labor market here at CNBC? David.
Brandon, I was going to pick up. I wonder the extent to which those key factors that you allude to are what people prioritize, or whether there's one that trumps them all, which is pay. And it's interesting, some of those big banks top the list because they've always been quite far ahead of the curve in boosting their internal minimum wage, quite well ahead of the marketplace. And yeah, I imagine pay is a big factor.
It is. In fact, in the annual rankings of the Just 100, it remains to be the number one issue is paying a fair and living wage to workers. And as you point out, that's the real reason why financials tend to lead. They do not only offer the highest minimum wage, but they disclose offering that. So you have companies like JP Morgan, like Citi, who have a starting hourly rate of about $24 an hour. So that is really why they're sort of rounding out this list, because of that number one issue, as you point out.
I see a lot of semiconductors at the top of the list. What do you think is behind that? Is it just pay or something more to it?
I think it's pay, but it's also the fact that these companies have a lot of resources, a lot of capital to invest in these types of programs, right? These benefits packages, I mean, they come at the expense of the company. It's why when companies are trying to improve their bottom line, sometimes they turn to layoffs of their workforce in order to sort of improve the fundamentals internally, right? It costs money to offer these numbers of weeks, 24 weeks. Some companies like NVIDIA offer for paid leave for primary parents. So, again, it's perhaps the fact that these companies have the means in order to provide for their employees in this way.
Yeah, money matters. Brandon, great story. Thank you. Brandon Gomez.
Thanks.
We are seeing those chip makers up today.